Skinner's Kent Academy and invited guests. I have here with me today Guy Huntrods, who was actively involved in World War II, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what it was like and what he did and his role in the Second World War. So, Guy, welcome. Thank you very much for coming today. So you've got lots and lots of medals. Would you like to start off by telling us about your most recent one that you received just yesterday?
Yes, but before I do that, I'd just like to say what a huge privilege, and I mean that, it is to be invited to do this, because in front of me is the future. I am the past, you are the present, and all of you are the future. And it's a huge privilege. Oh. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, about the medal, it just so happens it arrived yesterday from the government of France, who in an enlightened moment decided that surviving veterans, that's people who lived on D-Day and fought in France on D-Day in 1944, should be honoured by being made members of the Legion of Honour, and that's what this one is. So I'm christening this today. The other medals I've got, well, most of them are campaign medals, which are awarded for active service in the various campaigns in the world. The ones I've got, that's a General War Medal from 1939 to 45. That is the service in the Atlantic and convoys and so on. The bar on it is for service in France and Germany, because you couldn't have this, there's a separate medal for that, but they don't give them both, so if you have both you get a bar. That's what that bar is there. This is the Arctic Star, which was the service in the Arctic convoys in 1941 and 42, which of course went on until the end of 1944. I'll tell you about those convoys in a second. This one here is for service in the Far East and is the Burma Star. And at that time I was serving on a light cruiser in the East Indies Fleet. This medal is the Italy Star, which was a service in Sicily and Italy in 1943, both in the invasion of Sicily and one or two commando raids around those parts, including one with Winston Churchill's son, Randolph Churchill, in Italy, and that is the Victory Medal. This medal on the middle of my neck is nothing to do with the war, it's to do with my activities in civil life, and it's Commander of the British Empire.
So, let's start with D-Day landings. You were there.
Yes.
Do you want to describe what you were doing and how it felt to be there that day?
Well, I'll tell you, the first thing I can describe was I was 21 on the 18th of May 1944, and we knew D-Day was coming up. We'd been training for it, and I was wondering if I would ever be 21. That was my first memory. My second memory was we went through this very arduous training with one of the commandos, and then the operation took place. My chief memory of the day, and you will have seen films of it, lots of you, my chief memory of the day was the noise and the sheer size of the spectacle. It's just almost unimaginable. 4,500 ships from all parts of the world were brought together, from America, from Canada, from all around the UK, whatever, brought together in a 50-mile beach. And the Germans didn't see them coming and were surprised when they arrived. And it was all done, not by a computer, it was all done by the human brain, particularly by Admiral Sir Bertram Ramsay, who was the naval commander. Now, I was a young naval officer at this time, in charge of assault landing craft, and my job was to put these guys in exactly the right part of the beach, at exactly the right time, literally to the minute. Not like, oh, well, 5 minutes late will do, to the second. Because in military operations, as indeed in many things you find in life, time is of the essence. And one of the virtues that you should look after is punctuality, which alas is not what it was when I was young. Anyway, as it may be. And there was quite a lot of opposition. We landed on Sword Beach at 7:30 in the morning, but the chief memory, apart from being scared, which we're all scared, once things start happening, you stop being scared, you're too busy, you know, you're just too busy. But it's the anticipation for the first shot. I think most armed services people would tell you that. And the noise was incredible because we came in daylight. All the other landings that I had done, and I had done them in Italy and Sicily and elsewhere, they were all done in the dark, by surprise. In Sicily, we came over in broad daylight. In Normandy, we came over in broad daylight deliberately because Rommel, the German general, had sown the beaches heavily with mines and obstacles and anti-tank, and there's a big fall of tide there, and these needed to be exposed because if we'd come in, we would have hit them and there would have been carnage. So there was this enormous noise of battleships bombarding from 16-inch guns about 15 miles out, heavy cruisers, light cruisers, destroyers, and so on and so forth. And then finally, it was almost in some ways the scariest of all, they had these rocket ships, and they fired 1,000 rockets. And it's not like now where it's all so sophisticated and efficient. It was all a bit hit and miss in those days. And these things used to take off you over the top of you, and some of them would hang back, and you knew they were going to fall short, and you hoped to God they weren't going to fall on you. So all these sort of mixed things, and then there's a certain amount of machine gun power and shell fire going on. Churchill, of whom I hope you've heard, and if you haven't, you should have done, Churchill described the Arctic convoys, which started in 1941, as one of the worst journeys in the world. Those older of you will know that Russia was neutral or pro-German until June of 1941, when it was invaded by Germany. And suddenly Russia was our ally, having previously been our not very friendly neutral. Anyway, and Churchill, who historically was anti-communist, nevertheless, as far as he was concerned, whoever was Hitler's enemy was our enemy. And it was a famous occasion when he was asked by some journalist after he had been sort of enthusing about Russia, saying, well, how come you can enthuse about Russia when you've always been against it fiercely? And Churchill famously said, if Hitler declared war on hell, I would at least make a favorable reference to the devil in the House of Commons, which is a typical Churchill. So he resolved that we would do all we could to help Russia. And we were really ourselves in a very bad way, because although we got through 1940, and thanks to the brilliant RAF, we had won the Battle of Britain, we were still in a very weak position. And the possibility of invasion, which had been acute in 1940, we were within days of being invaded in 1940, was still there, but less likely, but it was still there. Nevertheless, we gave up a whole lot of armaments, tanks, fighters, air and guns, which we were receiving from America, we gave to the Russians, and they all had to be got there. And the only way to get them there in the winter was through the Arctic. I was on the Duke of York, which in fact was a battleship, we were involved in cover against German battleships and other and aircraft. I can tell you one thing: it was very cold, and because I did convoys in 1941 winter, 1942. And I was an ordinary seaman and 18 and very immature, but when you're young, you'll do anything. And you coped with it, but it was not comfortable. It was bitterly cold, and when you were on duty 4 hours, off 4 hours, you had to be on duty at action stations at dawn and dusk, and dawn in mid-Arctic. Dawn is at about 10 o'clock in the morning, and dusk is at about 2. And so you might be in your hammock having a rest, but you still have to go to your action station, so on. So it was a pretty hard life, and the food wasn't great, and it was a bit dodgy. Being tried, and one of the sad things I remember was how the British airborne gliders were being released and towed over by American DC-3s, and people were inexperienced, and it was a heavy wind, an unexpected strong wind, and many of the gliders were released too soon, and they fell far short of their objectives, and a lot fell into the sea. And I remember being so impressed, and I still am, that on the way we were going in dead quiet ahead of the main landing at about 2 hours before the main landing, in the dark, and not making a sound. We were traveling at very slow speed and whatever, and there on just a few hundred yards ahead loomed up out of the darkness a glider, and it was sinking, and these airborne guys were on it, and we couldn't have been more than 50 or 100 yards away from them, and they never said a word. Nobody called for help, because they knew we needed silence to get in. I'm very happy to say that after we landed our commandos and managed to get away, I came back, and I was able to pick up quite a lot of them, and we rescued a lot. But we were to land 2 lots of commandos, do 1 lot, go back in the hope that they would have captured the beach, and then take a second lot back. Well, to cut a long story short, we got the first lot in under quite heavy opposition, and my commanding officer was actually killed alongside me, and I suddenly found myself in command of the second lot, which meant a journey out about 20 miles and back again. I had 3 boats. Our main only machine firepower was a .5 Vickers machine gun plus revolver. I had wounded, I had prisoners, and I was being shot at by a rather biggish gun, 6-inch gun. And where the hell is it coming from? And then suddenly, out of the mist, loomed what looked just like an Italian destroyer. And thank God I never had to make the decision. I honestly didn't. But I thought, my God, what am I going to do? Am I going to win a Victoria Cross by raking his bridge with my machine gun and being blown out of the water, or am I going to give in? And I can honestly say, thank God I never had to do that, because out of the mist, a voice came over a broad loudspeaker. "Oh, sorry about that, chaps. Thought you were the enemy." And what had happened was that while we had been in doing our pieces, the parent ship had been attacked by German E-boats, 4 of them. And the destroyer, the escorting destroyer, had sunk 1 of them. Therefore, there were 3 echoes, and radar was very primitive in those. They had told the parent ship to get the hell out of it, and therefore they had 3 echoes on their radar, and they picked up 3. They thought 4 boats were coming back from the beach, and we were bringing 3, and they picked up 3. And the only thing that saved, the only reason I'm still alive today is because they were setting their guns for 20 knots, and I was doing 12. But it's an instance in life, and you may find that times come like this where you're on the cusp of having to make a decision, and suddenly it changes. Going on board my ship in Singapore Roads, and being sent for by the captain, who was like God, I may tell you, in a naval vessel. And he said, "Oh, Huntrods, you've done awfully well in Penang, and the commander-in-chief is very pleased with this ship. And he has given this ship the honor of leading the victory parade through Singapore." And we were a junior ship. We were a small cruiser. The bigger the ship, the more. So we were way about 20th in the list of senior. Anyway, I was given the honor, And behind the Royal Marine Band of HMS Nelson was Lieutenant Huntrods, which is this guy here, with his 30 sailors. And another of those quite extraordinary moments of my long life, and even talking to you now, you know, I get emotionally affected by it. First of all, it was the end of 6 years' war. So that in itself, and it had been a terrible war, let nobody kid you otherwise. Secondly, I knew that I was going to survive, and I was going to be able to go home and marry the girl I loved, whom I just got engaged to. That's the one I showed you. And thirdly, which was really the most memorably awful of all, was that the streets of Singapore were narrowly lined with ex-prisoners of war, skin and bone, literally. These poor men, Australians, English, Dutch, Americans, a few, who had been so appallingly treated by the Japanese. And I cried. I was quite tough in there. I was early 20s and quite tough. But I couldn't stop crying. And even when I talk to you now, and I'm not putting this on, I still feel emotional. Mm. So those are one or two little experiences in a long, and as I hasten to say at the beginning of this interview, very ordinary service career mirrored by millions of people. Those stick out with me. And talking to you young people just reminds me of what I've always been acutely aware of. Nobody wins a war, and they've now become even worse than they were. And peace is a dividend that you simply have not to lose. And in my humble opinion, without getting in the least degree political, as a matter of experience, the only way to keep the peace is to be strong. Because there are always nasty people, as there are no doubt, even in your wonderful school, you probably have the odd difficult character. There are always people who will take advantage of others and strike where they think they're weak. So you're the future, I'm the past. Thank you for listening to me, and I wish you everything that you wish yourselves. I have 8 grown-up grandchildren myself, so it's been a great pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Hi, Guy Huntrods. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for asking.